Nora, you know, she was a pretty easy baby, really. Labor was hard, so that part started out a little rough. But other than that, you know, I think was pretty typically developing really up until about age 3 to 4. I didn't feel like things were that different. She was always a little late to do things, a little late to walk, a little late to speak, but just when we were concerned, she would do it. So she was more like 13, 14, almost 15 months by the time she was really walking well. Right before she started kindergarten, we talked to her teacher and we just said, hey, keep us posted on how things go. Like, we had in the back of our heads something wasn't quite right. And so all week, that first week of school, I kept waiting for a note or something from the teacher. And the teacher had been a kindergarten teacher for a long time. So I felt like this lady's seen it all, she knows. And sure enough, that Friday, I pulled up and I picked Nora up from kindergarten. And the teacher says, have you ever thought about ADHD? And I looked at her and I said, no, but say no more. Like, okay. And so we diagnosed her. So, okay, now what? So we did behavioral therapy with a really great group we worked with in Seattle called Brooks Powers Group. And they do a lot of school psychological, neurodevelopmental kind of assessments for parents and schools. And I think it helped. You know, I think it helped us start to realize, okay, she's not going to do things typically. We need to start processing this. She struggles with organization. She struggles with executive function. She does not have, I think, really good memory. She doesn't have, and some of that's ADHD. I think some of it could be this borderline intellectual functioning. She does not see, if I do A, then B will happen, and then C will happen. There's not a lot of learning from past mistakes. So we've had the opportunity to have Nora in different school settings. We've been able to, she started in a small parochial school, a great school, tight-knit community, but it was very clear, and thank goodness for her second grade teacher who was like, we can't provide her what she needs. She needs more help than we can provide at this school. I think she does have more than just learning disabilities. And I think it became more and more clear she was getting pull-out and services through the Seattle public schools. We were qualified. She was on an IEP, or in the private school setting, it's an ISP. So she was getting extra tutoring, and that's where she was making her greatest progress, was one-on-one. And everyone could see that, is that if she has one-on-one support, she does much better. But she's getting probably upwards of 2 to 4 hours a day of individual support. And if we were to do that in the private setting, which we've done private tutors, that is an enormous expense. And kids like her, you're not just talking about educational expenses. We have that many more medical expenses for her. We have therapy expenses. So again, any relief is a blessing, right? Like, so I think back to the flexibility issue too, kids change as they develop. And her trajectory, we don't know what it's going to be. And so what may work for her now may not work for her later. You know, I think the research is very clear, right? Everyone learns differently, and a one-size-fits-all, I get, while we're providing public education, there's a social and resource allocation. I work in health economics. I totally get that piece. So you have to have some general standards by which works for most people. But I think in particular, kids with special needs need accommodations and need flexibility in their learning style. I want Nora to have all the opportunities and all the advantages. And I think the more I invest in her, the more she's going to be independent and be able to do all those things she wants to do. And in the long run, it benefits society. You know, she's taking care of herself. It's an emotional burden because this person isn't developing and starting to take on their own independence. They're very much reliant on you, but they're also growing into sort of being semi-independent, independent adults, but they can't be independent. I think a scholarship like this is very important, especially for a family like mine with a child that has different needs. I think being able to provide her flexibility in her education is vital for her future growth. I also think, though, people should think broadly about what does education mean. And again, I think I've mentioned life skills. You know, I also think Nora does a lot of therapy. One of the therapies she's benefited most from is equine adaptive horse therapy. And with that, she is getting educational. So she has to follow letters. She has to follow multi-step directions. She has to do her directionality, which can be a challenge. All these things are feeding into helping her learn and grow. So I think it shouldn't just be, education should be thought of in a broad context. We know our children the best and we know what they need. So I think giving us the power to make that decision is also very important. If we had access to this over the next 10 years, I can envision that Nora would benefit in the sense that we could have her living independently or attending college even. Those are things I have concerns about now and could see where, given the opportunity to have more flexibility in her educational needs, I can get her to that point where I know she's going to be safe and be able to live in an independent way. And that's my goal for her.